Hi, I'm Gaurav and I welcome you to join me in my journey. I'm off to one of the remotest and coldest deserts of the world, the Changtang Plateau.
Whenever I find time from being an assistant director on a film set, I have been traveling to remote parts of India, and throughout these journeys, my faithful and trusted companion has been Lona, my 350cc 4-stroke motorcycle.
Changtang is accessible by road for only 4 months, and I simply cannot wait to organize funds for a proper film crew to make a proper film on the beautiful Changtang. So I've decided to go there all alone, just me and Lona. I'll do the camera, the sound and the riding all by myself. Now riding the bike is easy, not a problem, but handling the camera is. I've never operated a professional camera before. But the most difficult part is this, me in front of the camera.
Spares for the bike and camera equipment take the maximum space, leaving little room for anything else. But this is a chance I'm ready to take. Under-equipped, without backup, and without a specific plan, I kickstart the most exciting journey of my life. This is the kind of life I like to live, on 2 wheels and on the road. My plan is to travel from Delhi to Manali, a popular hill station in the Himalayas, and from there to ride along the Manali-Leh highway and reach Leh, the main city of Ladakh. There onwards, travel to the Changtang Plateau, which lies between the Karakoram range in the north and the Great Himalayas in the south. That would mean riding 5,000 kilometers on some of the toughest roads in the world. After 240 kilometers of riding on straight roads, I get the first sight of the Himalayas at Kalka. I decide to avoid the popular route to Manali, which is the national highway via Mandi, and ride along small country roads. I prefer riding on lesser used routes, for it is in the smaller offbeat roads that one can see the real India, full of color and character, which is much better than the monotonous highway. I pass through towns with quaint names like Thiog and Khanag. At Khanag, I take a while to enjoy the laid-back ambience of a typical hill town. As light begins to fade, I realize that I must spend the night at Khanag itself. But the only state guest house in town is full up, and I am forced to pitch my tent out in the garden. I'm off early in the morning, and the ride gets steeper as I approach the Jalori Pass. The problems of filming myself in a solo mountain journey begin to impress themselves upon me. Just think about what I must do to get a shot like this. First, I must set the frame, focus and aperture just the way I would like it. Then, leaving the unprotected camera with the tape rolling at the mercy of the gods, I must go all the way back to a point where I think my shot will begin. and ride my way back to the camera. Check the shot and do it all over again if the shot isn't okay. Thankfully, this shot is alright in take 1. A day planned for well-deserved rest is consumed in making a locking device for the camera box. I need to secure the camera case independent of the rest of the luggage. Otherwise, each time I have to take a shot, I have to open the whole outfit, which consumes a lot of time and energy.
From here on, the journey is gonna get really tough and exciting. Tomorrow I'll be riding on the highest motorable road in the world. I just can't wait for the morning to arrive.
50 kilometers from Manali is the Rohtang Pass. I pause for a while to reflect that this is where I actually leave the crowds behind. No petrol pump for the next 365 kilometers and no mechanics too in case of a breakdown. And no phone booth for another 350 kilometers. The easy part was over. All travelers on the Manali-Leh highway need to register at Darcha and subsequently at two other points, Sarchu and Pang, so that the authorities, and more importantly my family, know exactly in which sector of the route they need to look for in case I ride over a cliff or some such thing. "40 kilometers on the odometer and at exactly 16,500 feet is the Barlachla Pass. La in Ladakhi means mountain pass. Even Ladakh means the land of high passes. It is a common practice of Tibetan Buddhism to tie prayer flags at places of high wind. The Buddhists believe that each rustle of the prayer flags carry with them the prayers and good wishes to the high heavens. At Barlachla, I encounter an enemy which cannot be seen but can only be experienced. At this altitude, it is recommended that one should not spend more than 5 minutes because of the highly rarefied atmosphere containing minimal amounts of oxygen. But I spent 40 minutes trying to take as many shots as possible, and inevitably, I experienced the typical symptoms of acute mountain sickness. A combined attack of severe headache, nausea, and disorientation are the symptoms of this sickness. To add to my woes, the wind is biting cold and the road is in a bad condition. After 120 kilometers, I stop at Sarchu. I cannot ride any further. Although it is just 2 in the afternoon, I crash out. But sleep is not easy to get in such a condition. It is a revelation to experience the helplessness one feels in situations like this. The mountaintops glow with a golden warmth, making me forget the sleepless night. I take a breath of fresh air and make a fresh start. Welcome to the paradise of India, says the board, which means I am leaving Himachal and entering the state of Jammu and Kashmir. Once again, I must remind you about my job as a single-person film unit. Taking shots like these are a challenge, and it is this very challenge that motivates me. I soon come upon a patch called Gata loops, a succession of 21 loops or hairpin bends. I soon hit Pang, a temporary settlement where the sweet strains of a Ladakhi song welcomes me. Jule, I am told, stands for hello or welcome in the Ladakhi language. To reach Leh, I need to ride over Tanglangla, the second highest motorable pass in the world. It is a special moment because even getting to this pass, which is at an astounding 17,582 feet, is an achievement for any biker. I zoom ahead and soon a spectacular and exotic city unfolds before me. The imposing and graceful Lamgyal Palace dwarfs the entire low-rise architecture of Leh. Leh was once one of the most important trading centers along the old Silk Route. It is today an important center for the practice and study of Tibetan Buddhism. I reached Leh in time for the famous Hemis festival. This is a festival celebrating the birthday of the deity Padmasambhava that comes once in 12 years. Outside, Lamas practice the religious dance, which is called Cham or the mask dance. The D-Day arrives with the unfurling of the rarest of tankas that is only brought out once in 12 years. The festivities begin with the appearance of fiercely masked deities, which are all avatars of Padmasambhava. Each reincarnation of Padmasambhava makes a characteristic theatrical entry to the center stage amidst much applause and fanfare. Finally, Padmasambhava, the most perfect of all beings, makes an entry to accept the good wishes of everyone present for his birthday. The Lamas then launch into a series of dances that express their joy at the occasion and their hatred for the devil of bad virtues that is annihilated in the process. Simply as a riot of color and pageantry, this festival is a veritable eye feast, and I feel extremely privileged to be able to witness all this firsthand. I not only service the whole bike, but also get them to make special slots for the extra fuel cans. This would give me a total carrying capacity of 34 liters of petrol and an unbroken ride of 900 kilometers.
Thank you.
My poor loaner, further burdened with more fuel and food, weighs 300 kilograms. And it is with an obese loaner that I start off on my real journey, my journey to Changthang. First stop is Changla, which is veritably the gateway to the incredible Changthang. Changthang literally means the northern plains. Lying in the rain shadow area between the Himalayas and the Karakoram range, it is a plateau spread over an area of 30,000 square kilometers and is at an average altitude of 15,000 feet. I plan to ride from Leh to the northernmost tip of Changthang and traverse the plateau to touch the southernmost tip. Suddenly the mountains give way to a vast expanse of land. This is Changthang. It is like entering a vast open cathedral of silence. "67 kilometers from the Changla Pass is the Pangong Tso Lake. So means lake in Ladakhi. Pangong is 130 kilometers in length. Only 1/3 of it is in India. The rest is in China. Just looking at its crystal clear waters makes you want to become a poet. A few kilometers away, I chance upon Siring Sabo, who is busy making carpets in the open air. She belongs to the Changpa community, the nomadic tribe that lives in Changthang, but is not nomadic herself. She tells me that the northernmost tip of Changthang is a grassland called Datta and informs me to first make my way to Phobrang and ask my way ahead from there. But between Phobrang and me lies an unexpected obstacle, a bridge. But one needs to be a trapeze artist to cross this one. I try to find my way around the bridge, but the problem is insurmountable. I give up and return to camp. In the morning, the army is at work, trying to repair the bridge. The engineer in charge informs me that this is a yearly ritual, as each winter the fierce snow makes the bridge unusable. I zip ahead towards Phobrang. Phobrang turns out to be a small settlement where the Indo-Tibetan border police has a small camp. At the camp, I meet Sub-Inspector Satyapal Singh.
So, sir, can you guide me how to reach there?
यस
हाँ sir.
यहाँ पर तो गुफा के पीछे से आके
Okay.
और उधर नीचे उतर जाओ पीछे भी साइड
Okay. So basically, I have to go cross that gompa here and pass the mountains which are not in the frame right now. And what I've heard is there's a small carnival happening where all the Changpas have come from the nearby villages. And I hope it's not over, so I'm rushing right now towards it so I can catch it on time. Sir,
Suddenly, I'm in a terrible hurry to reach Datta. And this is how fast I can rush. At this altitude, there is hardly any oxygen for the fuel to burn completely to give optimum performance. And on top of that, the arrogant inclines and the stubborn sand. There is no other alternative but to push the bike. The road ascends for miles onwards. I am stuck literally in the middle of nowhere.
I think I've lost my way. There were 2 dirt tracks ahead. I think I should have taken the another one or something. The dirt track is finished and all this grassland has started. So I really don't know how to find my way out of here. So the best idea would be to camp here. Someplace close by near the water. Although I would have loved to be at the carnival organized by the Changpas here. And it is somewhere here, but so frustrating that I cannot find it. Just somewhere here in the mountains. It's cold. It's way too cold to camp here. And the camera batteries are draining out fast. But I'm not gonna turn back. Now I'm even more adamant to reach Datta. I have to find this place no matter what.
In the morning, I realize that I am not the only one on the grassland. Giving me company are mountain rats, curious to see the new guest on their turf, and marmots, the cuddly little animals. I search the grassland from one end to the other, desperately looking for a track that will lead me to the elusive Datta. The village is nowhere in sight, but I see a man-made structure on top of a hill. I rush up the mountain slope to locate the carnival at Datta from the top. Prayer flags fluttering in the wind, holy inscriptions written on stone tablets. It must be a temple. It gives me hope that Datta is somewhere near. Standing on the holy ground, I see a grassland, tents, herds, and yes, a certain human activity too. This must be Datta. The carnival had gotten over the previous day, and I am disappointed to have missed it, but I am glad to at least be able to savor the music on offer. "19 days and 1700 kilometers. Finally, here I am at the northernmost tip of Changtang on a grassland named Datta, which does not exist on the map. I decide to stay here for a few more days and observe the Changpas. I am invited to have breakfast with the Changpa family I had befriended the previous evening. This is the tent of Pruntok Raptan, who at 85 is the oldest man on the grassland. The family is warm and hospitable. I am happy to see that they don't resent my presence, but it may take them some time to get used to the camera though. Changpas are basically nomadic herdsmen, their livelihood dependent on their livestock. A typical Changpa morning begins with the sheep and goats being released from their pens called lakhas and taken to nearby grasslands. Each family marks its stock with distinctive markings, and there is a rigorous body count at the exit gate to ensure that the inventory is accurate. After all, in Changpa society, status is decided by the size of the flock. Changpas live at the highest altitude used by mankind in the world. Spread over 30,000 square kilometers, there are just about 5,000 Changpas in Changtang. The tents in which the Changpas live intrigue me. The dark-hewn tent is called rebo. A rebo is perhaps the most valuable possession of a Changpa apart from his livestock. The tent is made out of strips of yak wool hair and is firmly tied onto the ground with the help of 9 sticks. It is a cone-shaped structure which is a perfect design to cut winds from all directions. The base of the tent is grounded with the help of boulders, leaving no room for the wind to peep in, as the wind speed in Changtang can go as high as 70 km per hour at -40 degrees Celsius. The tent is 10 feet in diameter and at least 40 times heavier than mine. I can't help but admire the shape, size and the beauty of probably a 1,000-year-old tent design. Inside, the tent is held up by 2 central wooden staffs known as ska.
Always dreamt about living in a Changpa tent, and this is a dream coming true. They always sleep lower than the ground level, so the air doesn't hit them. So as you can see, this is at least 2 feet down from the ground level. So they dig up a hole and they sleep down.
Changpas cook on the floor and the two halves of the rebo have an opening at the top to let the smoke out.
I slept in the tent at 16,000 feet for one night and I'm breathless. I'm not feeling well, I'm having headache. But this is amazing. It is amazing how these people survive in these extreme conditions. Really amazing.
A few Changpas come to inspect my tent and I become the topic of curiosity. I do not understand their language but gather that they want to know what brings me to these parts and how I camp and survive in Changtang. The Changpas have no idea of how special they are. Being the inhabitants of the highest altitudes in the world, I am curious about them just as most of the world is. But as of now, it is I who must answer their various questions. They have the wrong notion that my made in China tent is superior to their rebo. But they are right in telling me that a diet of cheese spread and biscuits is no diet for a traveler in Changtang. I couldn't agree more.
Cheese.
I chat with Sadan Namgyal, who thankfully understands and speaks rudimentary Hindi.
तो आप आर्मी में थे तो आप कुक थे ना आर्मी में?
कुक थी सर।
तो फिर वॉर में चाइना ने आपको पकड़ लिया?
पकड़ दिया 62
ओके।
तो हम 6 महीना वहाँ जेल में रहा तो उसी बाद हम वापस आया। तो
अभी आप इस उम्र पे जा रहे हैं तो आपको इतना प्रॉब्लम नहीं होता इस उम्र पे?
प्रॉब्लम तो बहुत होता है, सर्दी लगता है, प्रॉब्लम होता है, फिर भी क्या करेगा, हमारे इन माल दौलत नहीं ना, इसे गुजारा करना पड़ता है, क्या करें। नहीं तो अपना जैसे कि ज़्यादा पैसा है तो बस वो दुकान खोलो बस बैठ जाओ। हमारे ऐसे नहीं होते कि हम गरीब इस बार में घूमते रहना पड़ता है।
अच्छा, ये जैसे 4-4 महीना अकेले जाते हैं तो बोर नहीं हो जाते? अब क्या करते क्या हैं?
क्या करेगा, जाना पड़ता है, फिर हमारा काम ही ये है। हमारा नौकरी नहीं होता है, ये बीड़ू के पीछे जाते हैं, बीड़ू को पालते हैं, इनको बुरा हो जाता है, खुश 4-15-20 बीड़ी करता है, फिर इसका कीमत खाती है।
तो आपके हिसाब से चांगतंग प्लेटू का मीनिंग क्या है? चांगतंग का
चांगतंग जैसे ये है कि चांगतंग जहाँ आदमी काम होता है, आदमी नहीं है, गाँव नहीं है, उसको बोलते हैं चांगतंग, खाली जगह हो जाए उसको चांगतंग बोलते हैं।
But there is a reason why the Changpas choose to live in the empty spaces of Changtang. Pashma.
This is Pash, out of which Pashmina shawls are made.
Pashma is the soft undercoat of fleece beneath the shaggy hair of the mountain goat. It is the raw material for the finest and most expensive woolen fabrics in the world. The shawls made from Pashma are so light and warm that a single thin shawl can produce the warmth of 6 sweaters. For Pashma, these goats need to be reared at heights of 15,000 feet and above, because the cooler the temperature, the better is the quality of Pashma. Traditionally, Pashmul was bartered for rice and salt, but today it is sold to the traders in Leh. The sale of Pashma is the main pillar on which the economy of Changtang rests. While the women do the Pashma combing, the men simply engage in guzzling some chang, a local intoxicant made out of fermented barley. I too decide to join in the good cheer. Suddenly, I become the clumsy city guy who got high on chang without even drinking it. It sort of breaks the ice. The Changpas seem comfortable with my presence. They know I haven't come to study them, and they are right. I simply want to share and experience their world. As evening descends, it's time for the flocks to return home. It is also time for young Dilly Dakor to reunite with her husband Rigzing. They met 2 years ago when both were travelling with their flocks in the chilly winter of Changthang. A romance blossomed and they married the following summer over a simple ritual and lot of Chang. Ringzing Thodol is their 1-year-old daughter. The mother-in-law busies herself in milking the goats. Goat milk and its products comprise a very important part of Changpa diet. The excess milk is then turned into either butter or cheese. The Changpas have a unique way of making butter. The entire skin of a sheep is made into an airy balloon. All other openings of this ingenious container are stitched and milk is poured in through the neck. The milk inside this airbag is stirred with a continuous rocking motion for 2 hours until the butter is ready. The butter so produced is used as a cooking medium. The family gets down to preparing dinner, and another day in Datta comes to an end. I rush to the army camp at Phobrang, as I have been every evening since I came to Datta, to recharge the camera batteries. I have been sparing you many tedious details about my woes as a one-man film unit, but battery charging in a non-electrified Changthang is my biggest nightmare. I have been in Datta for 5 days now and become quite a member of Prunto Graptan's family. He insists that I have my meals with him, which is wonderful, except I am a little apprehensive about the milk and butter which is churned out in the smelly dried goat skin.
चाय हो गया नहीं ले दो ना जी आटे का है ना
Today is not like other days at Datta. In fact, today, Datta will cease to exist in a manner of speaking. The entire settlement will move to another grassland, as grasslands in and around Datta are nearly exhausted. This is the very essence of nomadic life. In the Changpa world, the word permanence is non-existent. To be a nomad means to be ready for 1,000 farewells in a single lifetime. I watch in wondrous awe as a settlement of months is dismantled in a few hours with efficiency, ease, and very little ado.
I thought packing and unpacking the luggage on and off my bike was a big deal, but this was really a humbling experience. It took them 2.5 hours to pack their tents, all their belongings, food, all their stuff, blankets, everything. And finally we are setting off right now.
Like the Changpas, I am also traveling with meager possessions. But the only difference is, while my bike carries only a small fraction of all my worldly belongings, their yaks and horses carry everything they own. Much before agrarian life began, mankind in his semi-nomadic avatar must have been pretty much like the Changpas, and I feel thrilled to be able to witness a ritual that has remained unchanged since millennia. I realize that I can understand nothing about the beautiful Changtang unless I understand the very friendly yet enigmatic Changpas. But first, I give myself a tough ride to feed my biker's vanity. I decide to take a shot at the highest motorable pass in the world. It is just 22 kilometers from Phobrang, but the approach track is so tough that no solo biker has ever managed to reach this pass before. I take only still images as the video camera batteries are getting charged at the army camp. This makes the bike lighter, which is fortunate as I push rather than ride it to the top. Finally, I reach Marzimikla at an altitude of 18,634 feet. At the sight of that milestone, all my exhaustion drops away, at least for a while.
The ride from Spagmit till now is beautiful. I've been riding along the dirt track with Pangongso Lake, but it's scary at the same time because being a border area, not many vehicles are allowed to ply on this route. This road is only made for army vehicles. My next stop will be some army town named Chushul, which I'll get after some. नहीं यार क्या बोल रहा है गौरव?
Weeks of camping and surviving on cheese and biscuits at high altitude finally takes its toll.
Dirt track along with Pangong. This is the turn I was told about. The lake. This is the turn I was told to have a look.
I cannot concentrate. It feels as if I am not in control of my own body. I know I will have a good laugh about this confusion later, but it doesn't look funny now, at least to me. Datta was the northernmost tip, and as per plan, I am riding to the central Changtang. I hit a green patch and see some horses out to pasture. I meet two Changpas working for the Indian Army and approach them for directions. They greet me in Chinese to know my nationality. Convinced that I am not a Chinese spy, they agree to help me.
चांगपा के बारे में. अच्छा. तो यहाँ चांगपा कहाँ मिलेगा? चांगपा नोमैड्स टेंट में रहते हैं ना?
चांगपा तो मिलेगा वो करचम है ना?
कर्जा में क्या बेचूंगा?
प्योर वाला अच्छा वाला प्योर चांगपा मिलेगा तो चाहिए तो वो करजम से नीचे चलो ना प्योर चांगपा मिलेगा. सगा के आगे मर जाओ ना, सगा के आगे जाएगा तो चना मिलेगा ना, फिर तो आप मार देगा ना कसम से. पक्का रहेगा कसम से. इधर
बाइक जाता.
हाँ बाइक जाता.
बाइक जाता.
I reach Khargyam and I am surprised to find that there is no Changpa settlement, which is not the picture my friends the army horseminders had created. I have no choice but to camp here, as evening is descending quickly, the wind freezing cold, and I am again suffering from high altitude blues.
night was pretty cold. It was very uncomfortable to sleep in the tent. Sonam came to wake me up in the morning, and Sonam recognized me from the tent in Datta. He was there in Datta, right?
Realizing that I'm not keeping well, the sweet Mr. Sonam invites me to have lunch at his tent, which is a little down the road. At lunch, I meet another Mr. Sonam. These guys really dig this name. Sonam number 2 is fascinated, probably because it has been years since anyone asked him his name.
उनका नाम क्या है?
सरम
हाँ?
मेरे नाम
हाँ.
सरम श्री
सरम.
सनम श्री
सनम श्री.
हाँ
उसका नाम सोनम, आपका नाम सनम.
कच्चा सनम
Both the Sonams are from Trishul. They work as watchmen guarding road construction machines for a meager amount of 2,600 rupees. They visit their families once a month. Lunch consists mainly of turmeric flavored rice and a pre-cooked vegetable that I have contributed. Both the Sonams are Changpas who have given up on the nomadic life and have to manage on their meager salaries. But this has neither diminished their generosity nor affection.
बहुत ज़्यादा दे दिया.
अरे नहीं ये खा जाना है ना बस सिर्फ जाना है खत्म कर क्या जवान है रखना बड़ी घूम की थक जाएगा तंगा में तो तंगा शो तो बस वे लो तंगा में ना का जरा ना का जगह तो मैं लड़
I am overcome by emotion at the end of our little meeting, and it is with a heavy heart that I bid farewell to both the Sonams. Despite the warning, I decide to ride towards the Chinese border to reach southern Changtang.
This moment is definitely the highlight of my journey till now. Behind me is China. That mountain.
I chance upon a village called Rongo, which happens to have a state guest house, and the guest house is vacant by God's grace. The sight of a bed is like a vision of heaven. Jurgen, the caretaker, cheerfully tells me that food is not provided, but I am welcome to use the kitchen facilities. Hot food, a hot bath, and a soft, warm bed. The sleep I sleep in Rongo is the sweetest I have in a long, long time. Rongo turns out to be a pleasant surprise. After having seen bleak and barren landscapes kilometer after kilometer, I feast my eyes on a burst of green vegetation. Here the Changpas have made permanent houses. The piled up bricks in a Pakka Changpa house is a sign that winds of change are blowing in this land of antiquity and tradition. There is a small primary school just beside the guest house. A teacher requests me to teach the children since there is a shortage of teachers. I happily agree to try my hand at an alternate profession. I am teaching a lesson called Cowboy. It talks about how the cowboys live in difficult terrain, travel constantly, and are busy minding their herds.
In West America, cowboys or cowhands lead a hard and lonely life.
I hope the Changpa children are able to spot the similarities between the romanticized, glamorous Wild West heroes and their own unsung elders.
Far away from their families.
One evening, I find my way to my new friend Urgan, the caretaker's house, who lives with his wife and child. He informs me that he is a Changpa too, but has chosen to live a settled life. But his father still leads a nomadic life on a grassland 30 kilometers from Rongo. I am anxious to meet this man who has chosen to live the Changpa way of life, which is not in the comforts of a concrete house, but in the wilderness of Changthang. The man's name is Sewang, spelt with a T. In a non-monetized world, where wealth is still counted in terms of how many sheep, goats, yaks and horses you possess, Sewang is a tycoon. As the camera pans, each and every animal you see in the frame belongs to Sewang. But the man has no time to gloat over his riches. He is busy gathering the stock just returned from grazing. His wife and 3 daughters too work vigorously to manage the large and unwieldy herd.
दादा ये कब लिया था फोटो?
ये फोटो
हाँ
ये गर्मी का आ गया ना आपका बाहर मुल्क का
हाँ
उसको फोटो खींची पेटले में यहाँ बेच दिया।
तो ये लामनतदार थे अपना?
हाँ लाबादार बहुत तंबू वाला 200 भी ज़्यादा तंबू उसको लाबादार बना दिया। तिब्बत में आने का टाइम हमारे पिताजी दूसरा का तिब्बत का आदमी आ जाता है ना ये भाग से।
अच्छा ये वॉर की टाइम इंडस चाइना वॉर
65 में 65 में आ गया 20-25 तंबू फिर इधर से बहुत अच्छा करके रख दिया ना। दूसरा का बोलता है घास नहीं है मत आओ। हमारे पिताजी का बोलता था आप बैठो खुश हो जाओ। फिर तक खुश हो गया दली लामा के पास उसको नाम भी गया ना हमारे पिताजी का नाम गया। फिर में गुजर हो गया 85 उम्र में गुजर हो गया ना।
अच्छा
ये तक तो बहुत काम कर रहे हम।
As I watch him sleep a carefree and sound sleep under the open sky, I realize why this man can never be happy in a concrete house. It is an idyllic life in the most romantic sense.
apple. B for
ball.
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 Boy. Ball or boy.
Boy.
लड़ाकी में क्या? Thew. Thew.
Two.
C for
Tela.
cat.
Cat.
Cat. Kite नहीं, cat. D for
D for
dog. Dog यानी
कुत्ता.
कुत्ता. और लड़ाकी में खी.
लाल का क्या बोलता है? लाल का
लाल को रेड.
ड्रेस
रेड.
रेड बिली काला का बिली
काला. हाँ, ब्लैक काला. सफेद का वाइट.
हरा का
ग्रीन. ग्रीन घास ग्रीन. स्काई ब्लू. नीला. हाँ,
हनमैन का
किसका?
ये क्या बोलेगा नाम? हनमैन का
आसमान को. अभी बादल है, इसको क्लाउड बोलेगा. बादल. क्लाउड.
As I spend time with him, I realize that Sevang's character has been sculpted by the landscapes around him. Very gentle yet very strong. He is a typical Changpa, but there is something special about him. Ever since I have been here, Sevang has been cooking special dinners for me. He insists that I have meat as it provides energy to combat the harsh Changtang weather. Generally, Changpas eat a mild preparation, but for my sake, Sevang adds extra salt and chili. In the morning, I am shown the family heirlooms. I know that even to be shown the family wealth is a sign of his growing friendship and trust, and I feel grateful for both. The most important piece of traditional jewelry is the turquoise-studded headgear that is worn by Ladakhi women at all occasions and festivals. The higher the number of turquoises, the higher is the status of its wearer. A long yak wool coat, along with a colorful shawl and long braided hair, complete the guidebook to a well-dressed woman in Ladakh. As for the man, he needs to wear a nice fur-lined cap, a fur-lined long coat, a kamarband, and a knife to add a dash of matchiness to the proceedings. But the real revelation is in what the coat hides rather than flaunts. The coat reveals itself to be a striking woolskin coat on the inside with snow leopard fur as lining.
दादा ये कब लिया आपने? ये कितने साल हो गए?
25 साल
25 साल?
हाँ
25 साल. और कितना में लिया आपने?
3000 चलिए 30,000 30,000
30,000.
हाँ 30,000.
वो कितना वुल्फ है, कितना चमड़ी है?
पता नहीं है ना उसको.
पता नहीं.
ये मालूम नहीं है ना. वो तिब्बत से लिया ना सर.
तिब्बत से लिया?
चीना में लिया ना. चीना शहर में वो व्यापार से लिया ना सर.
आप कितने वर्षों से यहाँ पहाड़ में रहते हैं और आपके रोंगो में इतना पैसा है, बच्चे के पास घर है, गाड़ी है, तो भी आप यहाँ क्यों रहते हैं?
नहीं, रेबू में घर में रहने से नहीं है ना. हमारे पैदा भी रेबू में हो गया. बाल बकरा बीटू के साथ पैदा हो गया. दिल का घर में बैठेगा तो ठीक नहीं है. बकरा बीटू देखेगा तो खुश हो जाता है.
आपका पिताजी रेबो में रहा, वो रेबो आपको मिला, भगवान आपको मिला, और अभी आपके बाद मेरे को लगता नहीं युर्गन को इंटरेस्ट है ये बकरी चलाने में, तो आपको कैसा लगता है?
दिल ठीक नहीं लगता है ना. उर्जन को उसके साथ बकरा बीटू के साथ बैठने से हमारा दिल ठीक होता है. फिर उसको नहीं बैठेगा तो क्या करना है? फिर हमारा था कि बकरा बीटू के साथ बैठने का दिल ठीक है. चंपा को इसको बकरा बीटू के जनवरी में पेट भर जाता ना, फिर वो पैसा नहीं है तो उसको ऊन बेचेगा, ले 5 महीने बेचेगा, पैसा मिल जाएगा। फिर उसको काम भी हमारा बूटा है, नहीं जा सकता है, काम करेगा तो ठीक भी नहीं होता ना, दिल के ठीक नहीं, बिल्कुल नहीं। पहले छोटा के टाइम बागरा बीड़ी के साथ चलता है, उसको दूध पीता है, दही पीता खाता है, फिर तो आदमी का दिल खुश हो जाता ना।
Sewang's son Urgan, along with a truck full of Rongoites, stop en route at the Rebo. They're heading to Hanle for a big religious ceremony. I decide to accompany them and take my leave of Sewang, but not before promising to be back with him after the ceremony. The father and son have a strange frost between them. It's quite obvious that the issue of forsaking the Rebo and the grasslands is standing between the two like an insuperable wall. I travel along with the rest of the cavalcade, feeling very much like a Changpa myself. The air is so clear in these parts that the Hanle Palace can be spotted from almost 25 kilometers away. The Hanle Palace is an imposing sight by any standards. It was built by King Senge Namgyal, also known as the Lion King of Ladakh, sometime in the 17th century. Hanle was once an important political and religious center and a coveted point of conquest for many a marauding army that rode up the Indus Valley. From its terraces can be seen some of the most beautiful sights you can ever wish to see. I try in vain to capture the ethereal and mystical beauty that surrounds me. The Rongoites camp at a ground close to the Hanle Palace and proceed to set up their tents without much ado.
Finally we are at Hanle. It was overcast since morning, so it's really cold right now. But everyone is in good spirits and I better pitch my tent before I freeze to death.
It's not long before all the tents are pitched and the barren ground starts looking like a well-established village. The ceremony is to be held at the Tashi Choling Monastery. It is a nunnery where nuns known as chomos are trained and initiated into the religious order. A mammoth tent under which the worshippers are to sit is been pitched in the courtyard. Truckloads of Changpas arrive at the Gompa from all over Changtang. Volunteers quickly organize themselves into small work groups and efficiently divide the work. It is amazing how the complicated task of organizing the lunch is performed with optimum speed and minimum fuss. Nothing is wasted, not even an empty rum bottle. An impromptu auction erupts in a corner. An enterprising village head of Rongo decides to put the coming together of so many changpas to good use. On sale is a coat made from the fur of infant sheep with the lining of exotic otter fur. The object of desire is finding many meters. I too place a bid, but I am outbid in a jiffy.
This coat is sold for 6,500. आपको पैसा कब देंगे?
ये बच्चे के लो
पैसा कब देंगे? अभी देंगे? पैसा नहीं, बाद में देंगे।
ये बच्चे के लो
Someone just came and told me that Ladakh का मौसम बॉम्बे का फैशन कभी भी बदल सकता है. That means the fashion in Bombay and the weather in Ladakh can change any time.
And it is with the intent of pleasing the rain gods that the Changpas have organized this ceremony. This year the women have been ill, according to the elders. The conditions are reminiscent of a drought in 1962 when the Changpas had lost almost 80% of their livestock. The possibility of drought is very real this year too. Hence, it is to pray for the rains that this 3-day prayer meeting has been organized. The prayer wheels are whirring, the prayer beads are out, and the butter lamps about to be lit. The stage is set for the solemn prayer to begin. There is no special prayer for eliciting rainfall. Each time the order sits to pray, they follow a fixed cycle of chanting that begins on a mild note and gradually ascends towards a crescendo. The belief is that whatever one wishes for in the prayers is granted by the compassionate Padmasambhava, a missionary who introduced Buddhism in Ladakh. Lamas and chomos pray together, creating a special musical cadence and rhythm. The entire atmosphere exudes a strange mystical aura. The Changpas follow Tibetan Buddhism as their religion, which owes its allegiance to the monasteries in Lhasa and to its exiled spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama. Popularized by Padmasambhava in the 10th century, this form of Mahayana Buddhism, called Vajrayana, has appropriated many tantric practices and also aspects of the native-born religion. The Changpas are all lost in intense prayer. The prayer wheel rotates endlessly to keep up with the chants of Om Mane Padme Hom, Om Mane Padme Hom, which literally means, behold, the jewel in the lotus. As the first day of prayers end, the Changpa slowly wend their way back to the camp, while the air still reverberates with the cadence of chants. But I have to visit another kind of temple at another part of Hanle, a temple of high science. This is the highest observatory in the world. For me, the observatory is a boon because it has electricity and I can recharge the camera batteries. The contrast between the scientific aura of the Hanle Observatory and the mystical activities of the day raises an interesting polemic within me, and I mull over it as the batteries come back to life. Night at the camp is best described by the jovial community kitchens, where sampa or barley dough soaked in vegetable soup is on offer. In other tents, the religious fervor of the day continues as the Changpas keep chanting deep into the night.
This is the second day of the puja, and Yashi has told me about a Tibetan settlement living several kilometers from here. So we're gonna go in his truck and have a look at the village there. Right, Yashi? Huh?
It is important to understand the sensitive political background behind the cheerful Panguk village, which is one of the 9 Tibetan refugee camps in Ladakh. Ever since China occupied Tibet in 1955, India has been extending support to refugees that have fled the Chinese authorities. Sewang's father had supported many such families, and Yeshi takes me to meet one of them, who are thrilled to know that I had spent some time at Sewang's. The conversations as well as the wall posters are mostly about the freedom struggle, which all of them believe in so much. I am then taken to the Tibetan Nomadic Cultural Handicraft Center, where the women are given vocational training in traditional crafts like wool thread making and carpet weaving. The Tibetan Children's Village at Panguk is part of the same attempt to rehabilitate the families, especially children who have been displaced by the political struggle.
Because E is a what? Overlap, isn't it? Because E is a and. Because A is a overlap.
While returning to Tashi Choling, I ruminate about the never say die attitude of the Tibetans, who continue to hope for the success of their cause. On day 3 of the marathon prayer session, the intensity has trebled. There is something dramatic, even in the cadence of the prayers. Priest and devotees are both lost in a transcendental reverie. The music starts heading towards a crescendo as the final rituals of the prayers begin. Outside, a strong wind has begun blowing to match strength with the music inside. The giant cloth canopy too begins swaying rather dramatically. The wind picks up speed, and many Changpas exclaim rather prematurely, I think, that the rains have arrived. But before long, dark clouds can be seen yonder, and rain soon falls at the monastery. Incredibly, the rains indeed have arrived. I simply cannot believe it. They prayed for rain, and rain came. Drizzling lightly at first, and then how it poured. I am deeply confused. Have I just witnessed a miracle of faith, or is it all mere coincidence? The chanting continues as elation and smiles spread across the faces of the lamas and the chomos. They prayed and their prayers were answered. What could be simpler than that? For the believer, nothing is miraculous. It is merely a confirmation of what he or she already knows to be true. The rainbow after the rain just completes the ethereal picture for me. I feel the thrilling touch of God's poetry, and for a while I am in faith as I contemplate the endless sky. Long after everyone's left, I sit outside the courtyard thinking about the amazing events that had just transpired. I feel a deep sense of peace as I sit in contemplation. When I get up, I am no longer a foreigner in Changtung. It's time for revelry and celebrations at the camp. The young people let their hair down and dance away till the late hours of the night. In the morning, the camp is brought down by the same efficient ease that we have already witnessed in Datta. Once again, I see the images of transience and impermanence that are such a regular feature of Changpa life. I bid a fond farewell to my Rongo friends and prepare for my toughest ride in Changtung. I must leave behind my tent, bike spares, in fact everything apart from my cameras to travel light on the non-motorable conditions ahead. Everyone advises me to abandon the idea and turn back, but I persist, as I want to touch the southern tip of Changtung to give my journey a sense of completion. The southernmost tip of Changtung happens to be a place called Chumur, just 120 kilometers from Hanle. But the track to Chumur is seldom used. A truck supposedly goes there once every 4 months or so. To save time, I decide not to use my video camera and only use my still camera during the journey. the landscapes Loner and I travel through are desolate beyond imagination. I am close to panic, but I have a weapon now that I didn't used to have a while ago. Faith. The longest and toughest 120 kilometers of my life finally yield a tiny little gompa at Chamur. From outside, it looks like a slightly eerie building, decrepit and fallen into disrepair. If I am allowed to shoot here, it will be the first time that a video camera has ever been allowed inside this monastery. I meet Namgyal, the sole inhabitant at the monastery. He agrees after a major interrogation to allow me to shoot the gompa. The Chamur gompa has acquired a certain arcane notoriety because it has kept the mummified body of its founding Lama for the past 50 years or so. The Lama loved this gompa so much that he wished never to leave it. He overlooks his room where all his personal articles are kept just the way he used to keep them. The smiling, glittering eyes of the long deceased Lama seem pleased at the way the room has been kept. Namgyal then takes me to another room, where he shows me the mummified severed hands of a woman who was supposedly a sorceress and caused at least 7 lamas to die by using her charms. The Lama who created the monastery managed to get the better of her and killed her, but not before he made her repent. Her mummified hands are proof that in her rigor mortis, she was meditating about the Buddha. The gompa also has some priceless objects of religious art, objects of intricate carving and inlaid gold, that would be of immense interest to the academic historian and the collector. I take a last look at the mysterious Chamur gompa and pat my back. It's strange as I think about the start of my journey, where I had wondered how Chamur would be. I think about all the apprehensions and doubts I had about the ride. But today, after 50 days and 5,000 kilometers, I am standing at Chamur. My dream has become real. Loner and I had done it. I head back to my good friend Sewang's Rebo, where I intend to spend my last few days in Changtang.
Today is my last day in the wilderness of Changtang and with the Sewang and family, with whom I had a wonderful time for the past few days. Today I have decided to go with the sheeps and graze the sheeps, since without that my Changpa experience would be incomplete.
Sewang's daughters are quite amused by the prospect of having me for company in their daily sojourn. Having filled enough muddy water to last them all day, they show me another very important element in their preparation: Changtang made sunblock lotion. We set off at a ripping pace, and I look at the gentle hills ahead without much trepidation. That's until the sheep begin to misbehave and run around. The first line of gentle hills are crossed in a jiffy, and soon the ascent isn't gentle anymore. I keep lagging behind and finally decide to stop them to ask exactly how much more we would have to walk. I am informed that 3 more lines of hills and a few more kilometers should see us through. I gamely try to keep up with the inexhaustible sheep and their herdswomen, but soon it's apparent that I will not be able to keep pace with them. I give up.
2 hours and 3 kilometers. That is all I could last. I stopped for a breather and these people have vanished somewhere behind the mountains and there is no way I could catch up with them now. But I'm really glad I could walk the distance I could with them, because now when I go back to Bombay, which is considered to be a city where people work the hardest, well, I wouldn't believe in that, because now I have really seen what hard work is, and that too without any Sundays and public holidays. But apart from the hard work, what is really nice to see is how these people maintain a wonderful relationship with family, society, religion and faith in this harsh conditions and long winters which can last up to 6 months. And they don't flaunt their lifestyles, they just live it in the most simplest way possible.
Back in Bombay, my friends call me a nomad because I am always footloose. But this is a very romantic idea of nomadic life. The real nomads lead a very difficult life and their wandering is governed by stark economic necessities. My brief interaction with the Changpas has made me realize that I am merely a traveler and not a nomad. It is a humbling experience to be amongst these wonderful people. I take leave of Sevang, with whom I had formed a deep emotional bond. I looked upon him as a father figure and hoped that he has some space for me in his heart too. He fondly called me the motorcycle Changpa, and I am touched when he asks me if my red yak is loaded. As I leave him among his bleating goats and mooing yaks, I know I am leaving behind a man who is completely happy with himself and his surroundings, which is more than what I could say for most of us. I had started this journey as an adventure ride, but my interaction with the Changpas had given it a completely different meaning. It will not be so easy for me to come out of this ride and be my old self again. The old self had changed somewhere in the wilderness of Changtang.
My 2-month journey started with fascination and ends today with admiration for the Changpa nomads. What I thought would be my biggest handicap, traveling on a bike, actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The limitations on the kind of equipment I could carry, quantity of food and supplies, and the physical hardship made me understand their lives much better. From here onwards, it's smooth national highways where there will be ample of restaurants to eat, mechanics to repair the bike and petrol pumps, unlike Changtang. And I guess that explains why Sevang doesn't like to sleep in the comforts of his concrete house. He doesn't like to depend on anybody. He wants to be free in spirit and experience life where every day's work looks the same but feels different. And as for me, my nomadic days are over. It's back to city life, where I'm sure I'll wonder every day, why did I ever come back from Changtang? July.
la 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 la